There are some cars in history that aren't just machines. They are legends forged in the heat of competition, born from the desperate need to dominate on the track, and built with the kind of audacity that only a handful of manufacturers ever dared to attempt. The Ford Mustang Boss 429 is one of those legends. It wasn't created simply to be a stylish muscle car cruising down American highways. It was born from Ford's ambition to take over NASCAR, to prove its engineering might, and to create something so rare and powerful that decades later, enthusiasts still whisper its name with respect. The late 1960s was the golden age of American muscle. Chevrolet had the Camaro, Dodge had the Charger and Challenger. Plymouth had the Barracuda, and Ford had the Mustang. But in racing, particularly in NASCAR, it wasn't styling or advertising gimmicks that mattered. It was horsepower, aerodynamics, and sheer dominance on the oval tracks. Ford knew that to keep pace with Chrysler's 426 Hemi, they needed something just as brutal, just as relentless. So they decided to build an engine so monstrous that even the body of the Mustang had to be reshaped just to contain it. That engine was the 429 cubic inch V8, known simply as the Boss 429. The story begins with NASCAR's homologation rules, which required manufacturers to sell a certain number of production cars fitted with the engines they wanted to use in competition. Chrysler had already taken advantage of this with its Hemi, and Ford couldn't sit back. They had the new 429 engine in development, massive, powerful, with hemispherical combustion chambers and free-breathing heads designed for high performance at screaming RPMs. But to get it into NASCAR, Ford needed to install it into a road-going car. The Mustang, already a household name, was chosen as the host. This was no easy task. The 429 was so big and wide that the standard Mustang's engine bay couldn't accommodate it. Ford turned to CarCraft, a specialty shop in Brighton, Michigan, to handle the engineering surgery. CarCraft had already worked with Ford on performance projects, and they were tasked with re-engineering the Mustang's front end. They widened the shock towers, modified the front suspension, and adjusted the entire engine compartment just so the Boss 429 could fit. It wasn't a normal Mustang anymore, it was something transformed. Something more intimidating, something rare. The Boss 429 wasn't about luxury or comfort. In fact, the interior was surprisingly simple compared to some other Mustangs of the era. Buyers didn't care about plush details. They were getting a street-legal NASCAR engine in disguise. On paper, the engine was rated at 375 horsepower, but anyone who knows the muscle car world understands that those numbers were deliberately underrated. In truth, the Boss 429 could produce well over 500 horsepower with only minor tuning. The engine was overbuilt, capable of enduring far more stress than daily driving could ever throw at it. It was like keeping a caged predator in your garage, waiting to be unleashed. When people talk about the Boss 429, they often describe it as more than just fast. It had an aura. The sheer size of the engine, the way the car sat aggressively low, the bulging hood scoop that wasn't there for show but for necessity. All of it gave the Boss a menacing presence. Start it up, and the sound wasn't like any other Mustang. It had a deep, throaty rumble that hinted at the raw power lurking beneath the hood. Even at idle, it sounded impatient, like it wanted to run, to race, to prove itself. But the Boss 429 wasn't perfect. Because of its racing-focused design, it wasn't the best drag strip car out of the box. Other Mustangs, like the Boss 302 or even the Shelby GT500, often felt quicker on the street because they were tuned more for immediate performance. The Boss 429, on the other hand, was built for the long game, for sustained high speeds, for endurance, for domination at the track. This made it somewhat misunderstood at the time. Some buyers didn't appreciate that what they had wasn't just another muscle car, it was a homologation special. A purpose-built machine with DNA from the racetrack. Only about 358 units of the Boss 429 were ever built between 1969 and 1970, making it one of the rarest Mustangs in existence. Each car was hand-assembled at CarCraft, meaning that every single Boss 429 carried a certain uniqueness. The 1969 models were the purest, instantly recognizable with their large hood scoop, aggressive stance, and subtle badging that hinted at the beast inside. The following year, 1970, saw some minor design changes, but the formula remained the same. Raw, intimidating power in a body that had become an icon of American automotive culture. Collectors today prize the Boss 429 like few other cars. At auctions, pristine examples often sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes even crossing the $1 million mark depending on originality and condition. This isn't just because of rarity, it's because the Boss 429 represents something irreplaceable. It was a product of a time when car makers would go to extreme lengths just to win on Sunday, believing that success on the track translated to sales on Monday. It was a time of fearless engineering, when rules were pushed and boundaries were tested. The Boss 429 embodies that spirit like no other Mustang. Driving a Boss 429 even today is an experience that few can compare with. It's not about modern conveniences. There are no digital screens, no traction control systems, no electronic stability aids. What you get instead is raw connection. The clutch is heavy, the steering demands muscle, and the throttle responds like a wild animal. It's a car that reminds you of your place as a driver, not in control, but in partnership with a machine that demands respect. Enthusiasts often say that when you slide behind the wheel and fire up the Boss 429, you don't just start a car, you awaken a piece of history. The vibrations, the noise, the smell of fuel, the mechanical clatter of that massive engine, all of it transports you back to an era when performance wasn't polished or refined but brutally honest. It was mechanical thunder, an iron fist in the world of horsepower. The Boss 429's legacy has only grown with time. Ford has revived the Boss name in modern Mustangs, but purists always look back to the 429 as the ultimate expression. It wasn't the fastest Mustang ever built, and it wasn't the flashiest, but it was the boldest. It was proof that Ford was willing to do whatever it took to compete with Chrysler's Hemi, and that the Mustang could be more than just a pony car. It could be a thoroughbred racer. Over 50 years later, the Boss 429 remains a symbol of what happens when engineering ambition meets racing obsession. Every time one roars to life at a car show or crosses the auction block, it draws crowds not just because it's rare, but because it carries a legend under its hood. It's a reminder that cars can be more than transportation. They can be declarations of intent, rolling statements of power, and testaments to human determination. For those lucky enough to own or even drive one, the Boss 429 isn't just a car. It's an experience, a time capsule, a visceral thrill that connects you to the roar of NASCAR. In its heyday and the fearless spirit of American muscle, the Mustang has worn many badges and taken many forms over the decades. But the Boss 429 will always stand apart, not just as one of the rarest Mustangs ever made, but as one of the most legendary muscle cars in history. It wasn't built to please everyone. It wasn't built to be comfortable, affordable, or practical. It was built to dominate, to intimidate, and to remind the world that Ford could build a machine to rival anything on the track. And in that mission, the Boss 429 succeeded. Its story continues to inspire generations of enthusiasts who dream of horsepower, heritage, and the roar of a V8 that once shook the asphalt with every lap. The Ford Mustang Boss 429 is proof that legends aren't always created in great numbers. Sometimes it only takes a few, crafted with purpose and passion to echo across history. And the Boss 429, even after all these years, continues to echo louder than most. The Ford Mustang Boss 429 is proof that legends aren't always created in great numbers. Sometimes it only takes a few, crafted with purpose and passion to echo across history. And the Boss 429, even after all these years, continues to echo louder than most. But here's the most incredible part. Every time one of these machines rolls out of a garage or fires up on an empty street, the world stops for a moment. People turn their heads, cameras come out, and hearts start to race, because they know they are witnessing something far more than just a car. And that's why even today, decades later, the Boss 429 is not simply remembered.